This is an OCR A-level biology video on biological molecules. Today we're going to be looking at water. In another video I'll be looking at lipids, which I've already prepared, and carbohydrates and proteins, all in separate videos. And linking on to lipids, we'll have a look at the phospholipid bilayer after that, but they're in future videos to come. First of all, let's start here with molecular bonding. So just an overview of what molecular bonding is on this page. So there's several different types of molecular bonds you need to know, but first of all we are going to look at covalent bonding. So covalent bonding is the sharing of electrons in the outer shell. It's the strongest known bond, and it's the most common one you'll see in biology. Obviously in chemistry there's lots more bonds, but I don't study chemistry so I wouldn't know. One type of covalent bond is a condensation reaction. This is usually for polymerization reactions when you're making long chains of monomers. It creates water as a byproduct. So condensation reactions, one example could be an ester bond. In fats, a C bonded to two carbons bonded to an oxygen, releasing one molecule of water. That's called an ester bond. And the opposite of condensation reaction is a hydrolysis reaction, which is the breaking of covalent bonds by addition of water. Okay, so on the right hand side we can see monomers, and monomers are small molecules that bind to identical molecules. So they form a subunit of polymers. Okay, then you have monosaccharides and polysaccharides. So monosaccharide is the monomer for carbohydrates, and polysaccharides are the monomer for the polymer for carbohydrates. For proteins, you have amino acids as the monomer, forming a polymer of polypeptide chain. And then we've got DNA and RNA, which have nucleotides as their monomers, and their polymer obviously is DNA and RNA. Okay. Finally, let's have a look at hydrogen bonds, and this video is covering water as well, and it's the fundamental thing in water's function. It's what makes water have the properties it does. So hydrogen bonds are weak interactions between slightly positively charged hydrogen atoms and slightly negatively charged atoms in general, so it can be any other atom. Okay, and our example here is water. So right now I'm drawing a water molecule. It's got this delta minus on the oxygen and delta plus on the hydrogen, indicating our slightly positive and slightly negative charge on the oxygen. Okay, and what this does, as you can see here, it forms a lattice, and then I draw the hydrogen bonds in dotted red lines because they're not actual bonds, they're just interactions. They're called hydrogen bonds, but they're nowhere near as strong as covalent bonds. As you can see, the hydrogen with a slightly positive charge interacts with the oxygen with a slightly negative charge, and the water molecules then form a sort of lattice shape, and this bond is the reason for most of water's functions I've already said. So now let's look at water, which is our first biological molecule that we're going to look at. So first of all, we've got the same diagram again here. So this lattice formation, lots of water molecules, hydrogen bonds between them, okay, in those red lines. So that's our water. It's a polar molecule and it has a rigid lattice structure, okay. So three states it can be in. It can be solid, liquid and gas, things you should already know. But the reasons for that is solids have lots of these hydrogen bonds, liquids have many of them, but some of them broken, hence they're more fluid, and gas has either no hydrogen bonds at all or just some. and that's why you can see like water vapor. Some molecules do stick together with weak interactions. Okay, so first property of water is cohesion and surface tension. So water molecules stick together, and that is called cohesion. Even in tall columns of water, the forces holding the molecules together prevent the column from breaking. Okay, so the example of this is in the xylem. So as you can see, I'll just write on xylem. As you can see, here I've drawn a xylem. We've got our water molecules in the vessel. They're attracted towards each other, so that's cohesion, and then they are attracted towards other surfaces, and that's called cohesion. And so the cohesive and adhesive forces together move up columns of water. You can watch my video on, I think it's unit 3.3, transporting plants, but it was the first ever video I made, and it's pretty low quality, and I do speak about water columns in xylem, so if you want to look at that you can. But that is how water moves up, and it is these cohesive and adhesive properties for it being a polar molecule, which is a key word. Okay. The second thing to look at is surface tension. So what I draw on here now is a similar thing to what you've already seen. So we've got water in this lattice structure. Hydrogen, uppermost water molecules have forces pulling down on them. If they've got these hydrogen bonds wanting them to pull them down, okay, but they've got no hydrogen bonds above them. Therefore, this creates an area of surface tension, so that uppermost water molecules are closely attracted to the other molecules, so they are pulled downwards, drawing them closer together, and that's what I illustrate next on the diagram. They're pulled together. Let's redraw that there, that they end up closer together, and that creates surface tension. And that is why you can get animals like water skaters that can walk on water, and so could Jesus too. But if you're studying biology, you probably don't believe that. Second of all, away from religious views, let's have a look at specific heat capacity. So a lot of energy is required to break the hydrogen bonds between the water molecules. That's not because they're strong bonds. We've already said they're not very strong. They're not an actual bond. It's the fact there's so many of them, and for an interaction it is pretty strong. So I'm kind of going against what I've said there, but they're not a bond, they're not as strong as a bond, but there's lots of them, and they're a fairly strong interaction. Okay, so therefore a lot of heat is required to raise its temperature, which keeps bodies of water at a stable temperature. Okay, so I've drawn there a fish happily swimming with a happy face, because the body of water it is in remains stable, and that is why aquatic organisms can survive. Okay, if we had animals that was living in a liquid that had low specific heat capacity, its temperature would easily be changed, okay, all the time, and that would mean they would really struggle to carry out homeostasis, thermoregulation, and keep their core body temperature at the correct temperature. Okay, and if they can't be doing that, they will die. Stuff like, now let's look at its solvent properties. So water is an excellent solvent. The tiny charges on its molecules attract other molecules or ions that have charges on them to spread around in between the water molecules, and we call that dissolving. Okay, so on this diagram here, I'll let it write that out. If you have a look over here, if we dotted in some circles in between. Okay, that is just to show that things can dissolve in between our water molecules, and they just happily, not happily, they don't have emotions, they readily dissolve into water. Okay, so it gives it so water has an excellent solvent properties because it is a polar molecule. These positive and negative charges allow other molecules to interact with it easily. Okay, next let's look at latent heat. So water can hold a lot of heat energy before it becomes a gas. Okay, so we've sort of spoken about that with specific heat, but this is talking about how heat energy is retained within the water, and that is really good for humans as heat is carried away when water evaporates. So sweating, we release hot water onto our skin. That's not what cools us down, because it's hot water, it's come from our body, which is overheating. It's the evaporation of that water that cools us down. So for thermoregulation, water having a high latent heat is really ideal for any animal that needs to cool themselves down, okay? Because the evaporation of that water takes away heat with it. Finally, we're going to look at density and viscosity, so the water's density. Water is relatively dense at 1 gram per centimetres cubed. That figure means nothing to me, it might to you. Most living organisms contain a lot of water and have a density close to water's. Therefore, most organisms can swim. Okay, so water is fairly viscous, so aquatic organisms have to be streamlined to cut through water easily. What I've drawn here, you might be thinking, what on earth have you put at the bottom of the page? And I've got a person running outside, and you can run pretty fast, can't you? If you ever have tried to run underwater with your body submerged, you'll realise you do not get very far at all, and that is because water is viscous. Okay, that was a fairly short video on the biological molecule of water. Next video I will be looking at lipids, and after that I'll probably do a video on the phospholipid bilayer because it goes hand in hand with lipids, and then obviously we'll go on to carbohydrates and proteins. Okay, thank you.